Okay, would the Preservation Commission please come to order? Ms. Morgan, please call the roll.
Chairman Langley. Here. Vice Chair Price.
Here.
Mr. Barrett.
Here.
Ms. Davis. Here. And Ms. Kirkpatrick.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to welcome Mr. Barrett to the Preservation Commission. Appreciate him agreeing to serve.
Thank you.
And we have two orders of business, one order of business, I reckon, unless someone would like to split these into two motions. Certificate of appropriateness for a fence and a sign at 342 South Chestnut Street. City of Prattville is the petitioner. Mr. Duke, would you like to make some comments?
Yes, sir. I'll be more than happy to present as well as describe for you what portions of your guidelines are relevant for this matter. You have a request by the city to construct a post and rail wood fence at 342 South Chestnut Street. If you're not familiar with that property, that is what's known as the Scott House. It's located directly here behind City Hall. And also at that location, there is a request to erect a lighted street sign and a post, and that post also includes a light that hangs off the opposite side of the post. And all of these would be constructed in conjunction with the creek walk, or the extension of the creek walk that's just been completed. The fence, you can see in your packet, there's an example that shows the fence that was installed along the creek bank. That would be the request of the similar type construction, and this is primarily to protect a specimen Yopon holly that sits on the south side of the building. That is, I am not a horticulturist, but the city's horticulturist recognizes that tree to be a very unique specimen. I forget the age that he's assigned to it, but generally Yopon hollies don't make it as far as this one has. So they're looking to protect that. The lighted street sign and the post will be constructed nearby, providing direction to the creek walk. The sign is a 1.5 foot by 6 foot sign that is similar to the sign that hangs from the mast arm here at Main Street. If you're familiar with that, there's one hanging from mast arm across Main Street. That's the exact type of sign that was proposed, except this one just says creek walk. Excuse me, creek walk. It's internally lit, be mounted perpendicular to Chestnut Street, so it extends out and mounted about 14 feet high above the street. Be glad to answer any questions about the request, or I can go just into how this corresponds to your guidelines.
Is this parcel still zoned residential?
That's a good question, Mr. Price. As far as zoning, I can't answer that, but I would imagine it still is. From a guideline standpoint, because the house that it's associated with is generally residential. It was constructed as a residential structure. It's maintained its residential appearance, even though it's been converted to other uses. First as a museum, and then as its present use for the creative arts. You would review it under your residential guidelines.
Okay.
It's very much like some of these businesses around the courthouse have been converted to a bail bonds. The structure itself was a residential structure when it's constructed, and therefore your guidelines were applied in that fashion. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I have a question. Are the signs in our guidelines, the way signs are described, and established. Are municipal signs different than like business signs and residential signs? Are there different guidelines for each?
Generally, the sign guidelines are set up to cover commercial type signs, signs that would be erected to identify a business or to identify the house number and or historical marker or something like that. Guidelines really don't speak to traffic signs because most of the time traffic signs are handled by the AASHTO manual. So they're if they meet those national standards for traffic signs, then these guidelines don't speak to that. The only reason this would be partially relevant is because it's not really a traffic sign. I mean, it is a traffic sign that's being proposed here, but it's not being used for that purpose. It's not a regulatory sign or a in the right-of-way announcement. So,
Joel, this fence that they're wanting to erect, the split rail, they are strictly wanting to circle that Yopon, and that's it.
Two sides.
North and east side.
Okay.
yes, ma'am, that is, I mean, as city staff, I have some understanding of what is intended there, as well as I'm also your staff. It's kind of a mixed position that I have here. I can answer questions from all perspectives here. The purpose is really just to protect the Yopon holly. The fence is one method for doing that.
Is that their only option? Because to me, just sticking up a split rail fence right there looks pretty ridiculous without, including some kind of landscaping or, is there another alternative to this design, or is this the only design they are presenting to us?
It's the only design that's being requested by the administration is, that's being proposed at this time. There are obviously, as you're aware, we've talked about many times, there are different ways to skin the cat, so to speak. There's, if you're looking for a barrier, that can be created as a low barrier, possibly with some kind of landscaping between there and the tree. There are various ways to do this.
But this is what they sent, just a fence right there.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we, does anyone have a motion? Can we go ahead and divide this item into two?
I would make a motion that we separate the items.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it. Okay, so let's talk about the fence first, right? Okay.
And if I might, I'll offer this photograph. This is one of the reasons that this is proposed is that, can you pass that down to the line? Whether intentional or not, I'm sure nobody's intending to harm a tree, but it makes convenient shade and a good place to park, and folks that use the Creative Arts Center tend to want to park in that location, and this is an attempt to try to modify that parking practice.
We will also get a lot more traffic there when the creek walk is really open for business. And I would like to just add for the record, that is an indigenous specimen. So it's valuable to us. And I have been very concerned since it's been all opened up.
Yes, ma'am. We share that concern from a city staff perspective, and we'd like to see something that would protect the tree and protect the root zone. Keep it from being, it's done very well. I'm sure that ground has been compacted pretty well, but you don't want to take any chances with it.
I totally understand and am in favor of protecting that. However, there are a lot of ways that our city horticulturists could come in and design something that, of course, would limit parking, up to that point. There's all kind of methods that can be utilized rather than just throwing up a split rail fence. So I would like to see another option or a few more options so that something a little more aesthetic, because you come up to that, and on the right-hand side, which you would know if it was the east or west or north or south, but I'll refer to it as the right-hand side. Yeah, facing the museum there. But they have done such a beautiful job with that. It just seems to me that, it's cutting ourselves short by not looking into other options, by just throwing up a fence. It serves its purpose, but to me, there's a lot of other ways that could accomplish the same goal, yet keeping with the beauty of what we have existing.
Is this fence, how tall would this fence be? I didn't see. I don't believe I saw that, unless I just missed it.
Mr. Price, I apologize. I don't think I have that dimension, but I would say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 feet.
So it's higher than our guidelines recommend.
Right. And I'll be glad to address that. Your guidelines allow certainly for a wood fence, but generally that's looking for a picket type fence in the front yard. Anything of the type that's proposed here is generally considered to be best in the rear yard or out of public view. Your guidelines allow for the traditional privacy fence or fence of this type, split or horizontal rail or railroad tie or timber fence, as your guideline specifically states, that may be located in rear yards but should be avoided on the fronts of houses. So the location that's proposed would basically be in conflict with that guideline.
Yes.
And unfortunately, this site doesn't have a private space to it. As the site has been converted, there's not much in the way of a space where it really would be appropriate by that guideline.
I would rather see just a steel pipe barrier that would be less conspicuous than, I know that probably intent was to follow through with the pickup fencing, but this is in the front of the residential property. Just something that's not ours.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Is there a motion before y'all, or are y'all still kind of discussing?
No, we're discussing.
Okay.
There's no motion, unless there's a call for the question.
Do we know what's the footprint this fence is even calling for? I know it wants to protect the root structure. Do we know how big that is?
The extent of the root structure?
Right. That would determine how big the fence is going to be, how wide.
The basic rule of thumb is the extent of the crown of the tree, but that literature I've read recently suggests that goes even further out than the crown. So the fence is going to be basically in the root structure. That root structure, given the age of the tree, extends probably under most of the lot. Right. So if you can get a basic idea of it by looking at the aerial photograph, I think. And I apologize, it's probably been copied several times to the point that but the area that's indicated as the fence, that mass of tree there is basically the crown of the tree, and you can see the fence is basically at the edge or just a little under that. In the photograph that's being circulated, you can kind of get
Looks like it's about
an idea of the size of the spread of the crown.
I reckon that's the crown there.
Do I understand this is a two-sided fence?
Basically, it would form a
Two-sided square? Two sides of the square?
basically a 90-degree angle, right angle, an L, so to speak, around the if we're looking at the property, and this is South Chestnut, you see the fence basically comes out and forms a barrier there between the parking area and the tree. On the south side, the extended creek walk, or the cross ties and the stone that's been laid to extend the creek walk, kind of forms a barrier along that side. So.
Well, it violates our guidelines. I mean, unless we want to violate guidelines, it violates the guidelines.
Y'all are, as always, you're welcome to substitute something in place of what they have, what the city is presenting in the application.
Let's see.
Something just to think about. The fence looks like it'll extend right to the edge of the gravel section of the driveway, right? It'll be right up against the right-of-way or close to it.
Right up against the gravel, yes, sir.
Does this fence have to be crash-worthy?
Pardon me?
Does this fence have to be crash-worthy?
That's probably a better question for the city engineer. I think that it's far enough, the fence is here, the edge of the right-of-way is there. Of course, you do have a T intersection here, or a turn. I'm not sure that's a concern, Mr. Barrett, given the fact that there's a tree barrier between there and the traffic. But
I'm just thinking if somebody hits it with their car and somebody gets messed up, and then there's deemed not a crash-worthy device. It's just the threat of a lawsuit is just.
Well, from a not a roadway perspective, but a property perspective, anytime you have a high barrier like that somebody could run into, rather than a kind of like a wheel stop, a low barrier is something that somebody bumps up to, and they know they can't go across it, or it's visually, say, a planted landscape island or something like that. In my opinion, would be better if you're looking from a crash perspective. Somebody backs into this, they knock it down, then you got a maintenance issue. So. Okay.
I make a motion that we table this part of the request with the option for the city to come back with a plan that is within our guidelines. A suggestion within the motion is landscape, shrubbery, or the low barriers. Excuse me. That's my motion.
You're talking about traffic barriers.
Traffic barriers. Well, yeah, the parking lot things.
You talking about like curbing? Okay, there's a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Langley seconds. All in favor of tabling this motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The item is tabled. Now to the street sign. Mr. Duke.
Yes, sir. Your guidelines basically prohibit the type of sign that is proposed from several perspectives. The first one would be the material that's proposed. The other is primarily the source of the lighting and being a closed cabinet like we saw just at your past meeting with the First Presbyterian Church presented a similar type proposal. I did note in the analysis in the staff report that it does not meet your guidelines, but there might be some consideration given its location being away from the building, that it is somewhat it is maintaining an established theme that the city has used in the historic district, that it is primarily an identification sign for a public facility. And you know, those are items that you may want to consider for this request. The pole, and I don't think I described that sufficiently, the 14-foot tall pole would be painted black. It would contain a light that is similar to the one that's been installed several years ago down at the Creekwall Garden. If you've been down there, it's a light, a fixture that's been crafted by city forces or city staff. It's kind of a crook neck, kind of looks sort of like a flower canopy, and is downward casting. So really what you'd be looking at is a sign that extends out. So this is Chestnut Street. This is the creek walk here. The sign extends out, not really into Chestnut Street, but so that you could see it visually as a pedestrian or from vehicle, identifying that as an access point.
My concern is that it's an internally lit sign where we just turned one down at our last meeting.
Yes, sir, I understand. And that is something that you need to look at, and if you're looking to approve this, that you need to make sure there's some distinction there between that sign and this one. The lighting that comes from this sign is not that great. It's really just enough to make it show up. It's not you're not going to have a lot of what I call bleed off lighting that leaves the sign. But again, that's a difficult position for y'all, given your guideline.
What will this sign be mounted on, Joel? I'm not sure I exactly understand.
Yes, ma'am. See if I can. I'm sorry, I almost asked him to.
Black metal?
Let's assume this is the pole
Frame.
that's being provided, and the sign would be mounted towards the top of the pole, and then on the opposite side of this pole would be the light that we're talking about. It would kind of bend over this way and downcasting light. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a recommendation that we table this as well. I don't see, if they come back with an alternate design, this may not even fit in that design, and we're also having some questions about the relevance of it following our policy and our guidelines. Maybe we could get a couple of options,
Sure.
you know, as far as the sign goes as well. If we're not approving the other today, we may be pulling the cart before the horse by approving or denying this when their plans may change regardless.
And Ms. Langley, I would also, given the questions about the actual appearance, I would like to make sure that we have the sign. It was purchased several years ago and never installed. It was before your guidelines were in place. And we can certainly bring that here so you can look at it.
Maybe some pictures of the one in the gardens
Sure.
that they're going to try to emulate.
We can actually bring all of the proposed pole, the sign, the light. It's all been fabricated.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, this is a different situation, but how many, it says no more than 2 signs should be placed on the property, don't we? How many signs have we got there?
Well, in this case, that would just be a second sign.
Oh, that would be the second.
Yeah, we have one sign
In the front.
that identifies the Scott House, the Creative Arts Center. And beyond that, maybe you might count the Wilson Pickett historic marker as a sign, but I wouldn't do that.
No, because the other signs are not within that parcel that are back in the back.
Right.
Right. Indicating where the creek walk.
Right. And I think there's some, and I'm not trying to make too strong a case here, but there's some consideration that might be given to the fact that it's not a standalone piece of property. It is part of
Right.
the overall city park, if you want to look
Right.
at it from that standpoint.
That's what I'm saying. That's
All this
kind of
property
different
that
situation.
surrounds it is being used as public open space.
So just to clarify, this sign was purchased by the city prior to our guidelines being installed, correct?
Mr. Barrett, I'd have to make absolute, excuse me, make absolute certain of that, but I believe these guidelines were formulated in 2007, and actually came into being adopted in 2008. I believe that sign has been in the city inventory for longer than that.
It's kind of like it would be grandfathered. Kind of like it would be grandfathered in.
It could be,
I guess.
sure. I mean,
Well, I mean, I would hate to, since this flows with the rest of the signage that the city has put up, I would have a problem. I wouldn't see the harm in this one just adding to it, since it's already in the inventory.
it is it's hard to say similar, but it is just like the identification signs the city is already installed here at Main Street.
Do we have another internally lit sign similar to this?
Yes, ma'am. The one that I was mentioning that's hanging from the mast arm here
Down here.
at Main Street,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
it is actually internally lit, and it does not really have much of an overflow of lighting. Okay, you would notice it in the evening that it's lit, but you might even mistake that for being lit by the street light. You know, just as little lighting as it actually gives off. It's enough to shine through the wording and show that, make it visible.
So you can read it.
Yes, ma'am.
But it is compatible in the same design as other city identification signage
Yes, ma'am.
already in use.
Correct.
I would like to better understand why it needs to be 14 feet high.
There's a motion on the floor to table. Can we go on and we can continue to discuss? Is there a second to that motion? We can kill the motion, or you can withdraw the motion, or we can.
I think I just made a recommendation. I didn't.
Oh, okay,
put in
okay.
the formality of the motion.
Okay.
Ms. Jean.
Okay, go ahead, James. Ms. Davis, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, now, I wasn't going to make a motion. I was just saying I would like to better understand the height of the sign.
Well, generally that's a good line of sight height if you're traveling southward on Chestnut Street. That would be generally in your line of sight. Okay. Vehicle, yes. Now, if you're a pedestrian, that's certainly high enough, and it's high enough to be out of the way of, somebody walking underneath it, a vehicle coming too close to it. So it's generally high enough so that there's not a conflict, but it's also visible. Just as an example, the maximum height generally for a commercial sign in other parts of the city is 25 feet. And generally that's almost too high to be comfortably visible from somebody driving. But that between 10 and about 15 feet is pretty good.
This will not overhang the street.
It'll overhang the sidewalk for sure, but not generally out into the street. And it's lower than a street light would be mounted.
Just, this might sound silly, but is there a danger in this having the appearance of a street sign when there's no vehicular traffic that goes that direction? Yeah, right, but
Mr. Barrett, I've been in this job many years, and I've seen folks make lots of mistakes about and things they shouldn't do. So yeah, I agree it's possible. the walk itself is generally not wide enough for a vehicle, although somebody could make a turn there and get up on the cross ties. But that's a question I would like to pose to the city engineer and see how he feels about that.
The actual, on this drawing, where will that sign be sited? On this photo, the area.
Yeah.
All right, how many signs do we have like that around?
I believe this is, Mr. Price, I'm going to say that we have this one, and I think we might have this one that's hanging over Main Street.
Right.
And I'm not sure if we have one hanging over Chestnut. I think we might.
I thought there was one.
In the gardens, I thought. Is there not one in the gardens?
No, we do not have a sign there. We have identification for the creek walk access. It's on the fence, but we don't have a.
Well, I'm just wondering if we had a precedent with several city signs that.
Well, if you would like to recess this meeting, we can walk outside and look at it, but we've done that before, but it sounds to me like you already have a motion that's been approved to table the other item, requesting that we bring you an example of it or even mock it up and set it up on site is not unreasonable. We can do all of that if it would make this board feel more comfortable with what you're.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we table this until our next meeting, and with the possibility of the city presenting an alternate sign, at their, if that be their choosing there, and that we have some hands-on pictures, photos, field trip, whatever, to be able to know a little bit more about what we're dealing with.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, that's your motion. So.
That's my motion.
All right, a motion's been made. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion of the item being tabled, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is tabled.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, is there any more business? Do we have any new business? Any old business? No. Do you need to bring anything up? No, sir, I don't. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? All right. All in favor? Aye. Stand.